A 2-5-1 refers to the second, fifth and first chord of the key. So for example, right now I'm in C major, so my 2 is D, D minor, my 5, the fifth chord of the key, is G, and the 1 is C, our tonic chord. Now, as you can hear, 2-5-1 is a very satisfying sounding chord progression, but the reason you hear people talk about them a lot is because they're incredibly good for changing key. You can basically change key to any key you like using a 2-5-1. So for example, as I said, right now we're in the key of C. If I wanted to move to a different key, for example F, all I have to do is play the 2-5-1 of that key, of the destination key. So I play the second, fifth and first chord in the destination of F major. And now we're in F major. And I can move back to C by just playing the second, fifth and first chords of C. Now I'm back in C. So we just modulated from the key of C major to the key of F major using a 2-5-1. And this is actually exactly what happens in the Beatles song From Me to You. During the verse of From Me to You, we are in the key of C major. However, for the middle 8, we get these chords, G minor, C and F. 2-5-1 in the key of F. So this 2-5-1 delivers us to the key of F. I come along to hold you and keep you by my side. However, we don't actually stay in this new key of F major for very long. Almost immediately we get another 2-5-1, this time returning us to the original key of C major. These three chords here, D, G and C, are the 2, 5 and 1 of C major. Now you may have noticed that the 2 chord here, the D chord, is actually a dominant chord, D7, D dominant 7, rather than the minor chord we got in the original 2-5-1 that moved us to F. With a 2-5-1, the 2 chord can actually be a major chord, a dominant chord, a minor chord, or a diminished chord. They will all serve the purpose of contributing to that modulation. The 1 chord, in fact, can also be quite flexible. It can be a major chord or a minor chord. The only chord really that has to stay in a certain form is the 5 chord. The 5 chord has to be major, or preferably a dominant chord, a dominant 7 chord. Without that, we don't get that sense of movement, that leading tone that takes us to the new key. We can see a 2-5-1 with a minor 1 chord here in Carole King's You've Got a Friend. This G minor, C and F minor are a 2-5-1 moving us from the key of A flat major to its relative minor key of F minor. Another Beatles song to change key via 2-5-1 is If I Fell. The intro of If I Fell is in the key of D flat major, but as we approach the opening verse of the song, we get this 2-5-1 in the key of D major, smoothly modulating us up a semitone. 'Cause I've been in love before and I found that love was more than just holding hands. If I gave my heart. Summer in the City by the Loving Spoonful also uses a 2-5-1 to modulate. The chorus of Summer in the City starts in F major. But at night it's a different world. Go out and find a girl. Come on. However, halfway through it starts to pivot back and forth between the chords of D minor and G. It'll be alright, and babe, don't you know it's a pity that the days can be like the nights in the summer. On the 4th occasion that it does this, these 2 chords wind up actually serving as the 2 and 5 chords for the verses key of C minor. In the summer, in the city, in the summer, in the city. So this is like a dragged out 2-5-1, where we kept moving back and forth between 2 and 5 before finally modulating to the new key. And this is the beauty of 2-5-1s. They are so good at creating smooth modulations because they effectively serve as pivot chords. For example, here, when the D minor and G chords are first introduced, we are squarely in the key of F major, so we hear these two chords as the 6th chord of the key and the major 2nd chord of the key. But then when we jump to C minor here for the second verse, these very same D minor and G chords are now also acting as the 2 and 5 chords in the new destination key. So they're effectively serving two functions at once, both in the current key and the destination key. Sunshine of My Life by Stevie Wonder opens in the key of B major, however shifts to the key of A flat major for the middle 8, and it achieves this by, surprise surprise, a 2-5-1. Then at the end of the middle 8 we modulate back to the original key of B major with, once again, a 2-5-1. Now, 2-5-1s are closely associated with jazz. Many jazz tunes navigate through a variety of keys using a variety of 2-5-1s. Satin Doll's A section explores the key of C major. But then when the B section arrives, we get this 2-5-1 progression in the key of F major, shifting us temporarily away from the key of C major and to the key of F major. This makes the music feel like it's ventured off into a new realm. It gives the B section its own distinct character. And the both legendary and infamous jazz standard Giant Steps by John Coltrane uses a torrent of 2-5-1s in different keys to take us on a dizzying journey around various key centres. You'll also often see 2-5-1s used as turnarounds. A turnaround is a short chord change used to prepare us to return to the beginning of the form, the beginning of a section. You'll see them a lot on jazz charts, a few chords at the end of the form in brackets. This is the turnaround, an optional chord change which you can use if you want to go back to the top of the form. That's why they're in brackets, because it's optional. If you were actually going to end the tune there, you wouldn't play the 2-5-1. But if you do want to go back to the top, the 2-5-1 will deliver you there neatly and smoothly. So after all of this talk about how 2-5-1s are amazing for changing key, you might be thinking, well, what actually is it about a 2-5-1 that makes it so good for changing key? What is it about this progression of chords that means that the final chord, the 1, sounds like our new tonic chord? Well, most of the heavy lifting in a 2-5-1 is done by the 5 chord. Generally speaking, the best way to resolve onto another chord is by using the chord that's built on the 5th degree of that destination chord. In other words, via a perfect cadence. So for example, if we were in the key of C major, like this passage here, this passage is in C major, and then we wanted to modulate to E flat major, the simplest and most direct way we could do that is by using the 5th degree chord of E flat major, which is B flat. And particularly if we put a dominant 7th on that B flat chord, it's going to be a very efficient way to move from C major to E flat. You can hear now that the E flat chord sounds like the tonic chord. It sounds like it could be our new point of rest. The dominant chord built on the 5th degree of our destination key is such a good chord for resolving onto that destination because it contains an unstable tritone interval between these two notes, which naturally wants to resolve onto that destination chord. It's this tritone which collapses into the new tonic chord, which is effectively the engine that drives a perfect cadence. So moving 5 to 1, moving in a perfect cadence, is a great way to move our tonal focus onto the destination chord, making that chord that we land on, in this case E flat, sound like our new tonic chord. So what's the 2 doing here? Why do we need a 2-5-1? Well, the 2 is here effectively to smooth out this change. although B flat 7 here moving to E flat is all we technically need to make the modulation happen, it can be a fairly stark jump, it's quite sudden. So the presence of the 2 chord eases us in to this key change. The 2 chord introduces some of the notes of the new destination key before the perfect cadence happens. So the modulation sort of begins here with the 2 chord, and then it's hit home by the 5 chord, resolving to the 1. Also, as we discussed in my recent video on the circle of fifths, because our 2 chord is a fifth away from the 5 chord, and the 5 chord is a fifth away from the 1 chord, all 3 of these chords fold into each other in a very effective, efficient way, because the perfect fifth, as we discussed in that video, is the smoothest and most pleasing interval we can have. Now, 2-5-1s are most commonly used for changing key, but you could use a 2-5-1 without actually changing key. One usage of 2-5-1s that doesn't really change our key center is when the 2-5-1 are used just to reaffirm the key that we're currently in. We might do this to provide a nice clear conclusion to a chord progression, making it abundantly clear where the key center is. For example, at the end of the verse of You Never Give Me Your Money by the Beatles, we get this 2-5-1 in the key of A minor. The song is already in the key of A minor, but by using A minor 2-5-1 at the end, it provides a nice clean, satisfying resolution to the chord progression. And another usage of 2-5-1s, which isn't a modulation, is when a 2-5-1 is just used as a chord loop, like any other chord progression. For example, the verse of Sunday Morning by Maroon 5 just loops around a repeating 2-5-1 in the key of C major. It just treats it as a standard chord loop.
Still some color share some skin.
This 2-5-1, along with the nice chord extensions here, gives the song a jazzy sound, but without the various modulations that you would typically find in a jazz tune. As I mentioned at the beginning, the reason that people talk about 2-5-1s so much, the reason they're so interesting, is that a super efficient way of changing key. It doesn't matter which key we're currently in or which key we want to arrive in, all we have to do is play those 3 chords, 2, 5 and 1, and we've now arrived in that new key. So to wrap this video up, what I want to do is I'm going to improvise here at the keyboard, starting in the key of C. And then I'm going to use 2-5-1s to travel through all 12 key centers, arriving again at the end in the key of C. And hopefully what you'll find is as we travel through each key, it's fairly seamless where one key ends and the next begins, because 2-5-1s just bridge that gap between the two. Let's get started. So as I said, starting in the key of C, traveling through all 12 key centers. and that's us back in the key of C. So some changes are starker, some changes aren't, but that really just came down to which two keys I move between. Some keys will sound smoother, some keys won't, depending on how distant they are to each other, how unrelated they are. But regardless, the 251 is always going to provide the smoothest way to change key. And thank you as always to all of the patrons who make my videos possible, including the names you see on screen right now, and Andre Sainz Diaja, Andy Deacon, Andrew Sussman, Austin Barrett, Austin Russell, Bob McKinstry, Boo Medell, Brittany Parker, Cam Orvilla, Colin Aiken, Charles Fenn, Chris Gabell, David Bennett-Hart, David Rivers, Donald Howard, Dr. Darren Wicks, Eleanor Skochenko, Eugene Leroy, FD Hodor, Greg Kabowski, Gilda Molotona, Hamish Brocklebank, Heinrich Kutcher, Hugo Miller, Ivan Pang, Jake Fisher, J.A. Kogensparger, John Dye, Josh Domchen, Josh Sadlin, Justin Vigor, Mark Saitera, Mark Ziegenhagen, Max O'Keefe, Melody Composer Squared, Michael Vivian, Nathan Lawrence, Nathaniel Park, Nick Chang, Paul Middleton, Paul Miller, Paul Paisley, Peter Dunphy, Roger Clay, Sean Kennedy, Steve Daly, Tim Beaker, Tim Payne, Victor Levy, Vedad Flowers, Vladimir Kodakov, Volti, the Washington Shakespearean Festival, Waylon Fairbanks, and Zaphod.